Hello everyone, welcome to today's EnRoute webinar. Today I'll be giving you an introduction into EnRoute 7, where we'll be discussing the major changes between EnRoute 6 and 7. Afterwards, I'll open it up for questions where you can ask any question. It doesn't have to be related to EnRoute 7, could be 6 or whatever application you require assistance with. So one of the major changes that we've issued was actually happened in the background. So we've moved from a 32-bit architecture to a 64-bit. You should notice this immediately when working with large files, 3D objects. You'll notice that they'll handle much more smoothly. Also, the nesting should speed up considerably when using EnRoute 7. As you can see here, we've also updated the EnRoute interface. We've now started working with drop-down menus, where the last selected option will always be available to you. And that is for opening, importing, for the creation of a rectangle, or as you can see, if we change that to a circle, now the circle will remain selected here. You also have the possibility to change your setup options, so you can get a custom setup, or you can even simulate the previous version, like this. So then if you've moved from 6 to 7, you'll be more familiar with this setup, I'm sure. For today's presentation, however, we'll be using the 7 complete. With this new interface, the way it's been structured, it will also allow you to customize shortcut, the menus, the hotkeys, even toolbars. We've got an additional video on that on our YouTube channel, so if you would like to check that out, and if you have any questions or if you'd like any assistance in modifying your installation afterwards, then please feel free to get in touch with us for that. Another major change that we've issued is in regards to the automated toolpathing function. So what we've done is we've structured it more from a left to right approach, as opposed to the previous version of the ATP. You would be jumping in between the tabs to eventually end up in the output tab. Here it's more of a left to right approach. So firstly, you select either no design application or a design application, then you select your parts or your list file here. Sure, you'll probably be familiar with most of these windows, as most of it has just changed in sequence. So here you map your layers to your strategies. As you'll notice now, apart from the default strategy, you'll also have a sheet trim strategy here. That's in regards to the double-sided processing, which has been added to the EnRoute 7 ATP. Next tab would be where all of your materials are listed. So if you have multiple materials with separate depths, you can list them here. Then for processing, all of these will be familiar to you. New one here would be the double-sided machining. We've also got some videos on that on our YouTube channel, but I'll also be covering this in a future webinar. And lastly, of course, you'll have the output window where you have your classical checkboxes, which you've also had in the previous version. And of course, here now you'll have your ordering available to you in the last tab as well. Another new functionality that we've added is actually the ability to create your meshes from contours directly. Instead of in the last version, you would have to first create a relief and then modify that to an STL file or a mesh. So now you would have the possibility to do that instantly from here. So just set up a height here, and then apply that. And then we'd actually, if we don't hit Shift F9, we would be able to preview it like this. And of course, then you would have the possibility to export this as an STL file, for example, which you could then use for 3D printing. Or, of course, you could also use that as building blocks to re-import into EnRoute when you're creating a larger 3D project. So if you can see here, then you would be able to open this as an STL file and deliver that to your, for example, 3D printing software, or just re-import it into EnRoute at a later stage. One of the next features, and one I like a lot, is the Flatbed tool. So you would actually use this tool if you've applied a print on a rigid material, for example. Let me just get some text on here. Let me just close it out. So let's say you have your EnRoute design, or your print design actually, and you will apply that to a material which you then like to route. What you would be able to do is actually add registration marks and use them to position your cut line correctly, even without having an automated camera system on your machine. So let's just get some circles on here. So you would have to include this on your design file before printing. And then let's just set these up in the corners. Then if we select our entire shape, you can actually go to the Flatbed tool. And then you'll say we had a radius of 5, so a mark of 10. So then the Flatbed tool will pick this up. And actually, when you've placed your applied media on the router, you could use your coordinate system of the machine to actually tell EnRoute where these are located. So the position can be entered here for each of them. I'll just simply drag them around for illustration purposes. All right, I forgot I have to actually transform these to curves before doing this. So again, we'll go in here. We'll say a fiducial of 10. And then if we hit apply, it will actually have moved our contours into the correct location, which we can then add toolpaths to. So as you can see, this will also account for any distortion the material has suffered during the application. Then one of the other improvements that we've made is to the island fill strategy and the spiral fill strategy. So we've changed the logic. For example, for the island fill, if we go into here and we simply apply a toolpath to it, we go to a depth of 1 in this case. As you can see, there will be multiple lifts here. Because of the way the island fill used to work in the past, we now have the possibility to actually choose to avoid lifts. So then, as you can see, it will add an extra toolpath to avoid lifting it, which will actually speed up the process of routing it. Then for the island fill, we've also made some changes. So in the past, you would only be able to use the island fill really when you were, the spiral fill when you were routing a perfect circle. Otherwise, if you would apply this to an ellipse, for example, then for each time the island fill was not able to complete the full circle, it would lift the tool out here and then just come back in here to just keep that circular shape. So in this case, if we apply the spiral fill, as you can see, it'll no longer lift at the edges, but it'll just continue the tool path. And in version 7, you would also have the possibility to control the center of this algorithm. So as you can see here, it puts it in the center of the object, but we could put it at an absolute coordinate as well. So as you can see now, it would revolve around the XY0. Apart from this, we've also added some things for the fabrication level. So if in the past you would only be able to add a curve compensation to objects, in this new version, we've also added the curve compensation for open offset, curve marking, and a fill for the curve. So this would be mainly for the fabrication customers. Some other minor changes that we've made is for the selection method. So if you have multiple objects on screen, in the past in EnRoute, you would always have to completely enclose your objects before it would select them. We've changed this around, that if you drag from the bottom up, you can select objects by simply touching them. If you drag top down, you would still have to completely enclose them. So this gives you some more utility when selecting objects in your design. Right. I just read Joey's question about the fiducial. A fiducial is actually a mark for a camera system to pick up. So a printing mark for the positioning. Something new that you can use as well, and which is also useful for the people running plasmas, so for the fabrication level, is that you are able to now preview the contours that will be actually cut out of your materials. So if we have a bunch of objects part of a design, if we select them and if we then hit Control-Shift-F9, we would be able to see what parts will actually fall out of the objects that we have. Of course, this will be, in this case, it's fairly easy to see because you have the container and all of the holes. But if you have a more complex design, that will be able to more easily show you what your part's going to look like, or what's the rest going to look like, and what will be cut out. Another small change that we did is we've made it more easy to go back into modifying text. So if we have EnRoute text here, and in the past, to be able to modify this as text, you would have to reopen the text tool to be able to go back in there. In EnRoute 7, you're simply able to double click it, then select the part you want to change, and then, for example, just change the font size, skewing, or positioning. For EnRoute 7, we've also added the possibility to mark objects and move them from the perspective view. Let me just write like this, for example, so that for positioning things on your plate, it'll give you a better overview while moving these around in some cases, especially when you're using the 3D objects. Apart from that, we've also added some printing updates. So now you would be able to print your preview to, for example, if we set up a Microsoft Print to PDF, then if we have like a 3D design or STL files in our object or in our plate, what we can then do is simply, if we, for example, have EnRoute 7, and let's say we give this a 3D shape. Then we would actually be able to go into the perspective view, position our camera the way we want to preview it or have it previewed. And then we can go into the file menu, choose to print, and then just, let's say, choose to print our plate. And then, of course, because we're printing to a file, it will ask us to select the location and name on my D drive. And then actually you would have access to a PDF that you could send to your customer to approve, for example. Another thing we've added is a change to the possibilities for selection. So if you have multiple closed and open shapes on your design, or if you're like troubleshooting certain files, you can actually then bring them into EnRoute and have a look at what's happening within the file. So if you then make a full selection of everything, then you can go into the edit menu, modify your selection, and now you have the possibility to select for open or closed contours. So if you're maybe trying to figure out why some file won't process through your ATP, it may be because the strategy is not assigned for open contours, and you can bring that into EnRoute and then just select for open contours and figure out why it is not toolpathing those objects. One feature we've added as well, it's actually a solution, would be the library manager. This would actually help you to modify your library. So you could modify the ini files. So your tool library, strategy library, you could just go into here, select a library, let's say tool library, and then this will bring up all of the tools you have available. And then you could simply delete the select items and hit save. One thing to keep in mind is, and this warning came up on my different monitor, is that you would have to close EnRoute when you're modifying a library, because it loads these libraries into the temporary memory, and upon closing EnRoute, it'll write them back to that file as well. So it would overwrite your changes again. The other possibility you have is to merge libraries. So if you have multiple installations of EnRoute and you'd like to merge, for example, tool libraries or strategy libraries or any other ini file, really, you could do that through this functionality. Finally, what we've also added to this version of EnRoute is the cloud window. So through the cloud window, you would have access to the EnRoute knowledge base, the YouTube project, you'd be able to access the SAI pages on Facebook, YouTube, and other social media. Be able to contact us through support or simply through the contact information. And you can also see here the events and training. Other cloud tools would be Find My Font, which you would have access to, which this will actually allow you to bring in certain images, and then the Find My Font application will help you figure out what font was used to create that design. Here you have access to Sign Design Elements as well, which is actually an online database where you can download images, vectors, anything you may want to work with visually. And then lastly, you would also have the possibility here to access the one-line fonts, which can be used for fabrication or doing engravings, so that you would have a single stroke instead of routing or engraving the contours of the letters. And lastly, you would also have the possibility to manage your subscription details here. So the general things you can also do from your online subscription account. So that, I believe, covers most of the changes we've issued. So now I'll be happy to open this up for questions, if any might have arose during the presentation. So initially, you may have to reset up your ATP file for this, the safest way of working, at least, or make a copy of your previous ATP file. Currently, still, that should be solved or patched around within the week, if I'm not mistaken. Apart from that, the ATP works in a very similar way as the previous one did. You may, if you want to do some double-sided processing, you might want to check out that video on our YouTube page. That wouldn't be an issue. So what I can do is just bring up an EnRoute 6 as well. So you do have the possibility to run them on the same computer. I don't believe so. So this one's not running the same license as the other one. You would be able to run it on the same license, but not be able to run both installations simultaneously, if that makes sense. So if you've had a version 6 that has been upgraded to version 7, or you're running the subscription, you can still activate the V6 builds with that activation code. So you can have V6 and V7 installed on the same computer, both with the same activation code, and you would not have to switch the license around for them, as they're both licensed to the same ID on your computer. All right, perfect. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to ask them now. If you think of any questions later, just send us an email, give us a call. You can always reach us through the support. All right. So if there are no other questions, I'll be closing down the presentation, and there's then nothing left for me than to wish you a nice rest of your day. You should still be able to load settings from the previous installations, yes. All right, you're welcome. Have a nice rest of your day.